All right, boys. BetterMMA is back. UFC Fat Potato just wrapped up, and I mean, it was the most Fat Potato performance from our two headlining Fat Potatoes, Marcin Tybura and Tuivasa. I want to get into the main event and the co-main event, so we're gonna speed run through and recap all of these fights and go over real quick how the card went. Impressions of the card right after watching it. Not a bad card, Going into it, I was very disappointed by a lot of the matchups. Not excited for a lot of the matchups, I should say. But some of the fights that I thought weren't going to be as exciting were more exciting. But we'll get into that. So let's jump right into it with Charlamous Grigoriou versus Chad Anheleger. Chad Anheleger proved me wrong. I picked Charlamous in this fight. I hadn't seen Charlamous fight before, but I had seen Chad Anheleger fight. And I just thought, the thing about Chad Anheleger, which is true still to this day, and it will be true throughout his career, he doesn't do exactly one thing very good. And that, to me, is just a very big turnoff in a UFC fighter, is when I can just be... It's very clear to tell that you don't do one thing very well or at a very high level. So it's just hard to see you beating anybody at any sort of high level. But then again, there are guys in the UFC who are just well-rounded and they end up catching wins, like Chad Anheleger did here. Charlamous Grigoriou is a guy who is very good in the grappling game, or I should say the wrestling game. So he was out wrestling Chad Anheleger for the first 2 rounds of that fight, what it seemed like to me. And then he essentially gassed so hard in the 3rd round. Chad Anheleger was using him like a human punching bag, literally. I mean, just standing right in front of this guy, feint, jab, cross, kick, anything that he wanted, to the body, to the head, to the leg, anything he wanted, Chad Anheleger was doing it, because Charlamous was simply just gassed and huffing on the feet, trying to wing a punch as Chad Anheleger was coming in, not throwing a single feint of himself. So Charlamous Grigoriou, I didn't realize that he was a Merab Aljo teammate. I'm stunned that they haven't gotten him in better cardio shape for his UFC debut. So I'm really stunned that he's actually a teammate of them. So not the best look for Longo MMA. Longo Weidman MMA is what I believe the gym goes by now. So not the best look for them putting out their guy, and he just completely gasses hard in the 3rd round. And there was some other gassing in the 3rd round from wrestlers later on in this card. So Chad Anheleger, impressive win. Who knows? Maybe he absolutely proves me wrong and becomes like a gatekeeper of the lower class of the bantamweight division. But I really don't see him hanging out in the UFC that long. But good for you, Chad Anheleger. You're going to keep a job for a little while. Thiago Moises versus Mitch Ramirez. Thiago Moises really got it done. I was picking on Tapology for Moises to get a 1st-round submission. In the 1st round, he almost did just that. But I had no idea how big and jacked this Mitch Ramirez guy is. He looks like he was easily 180 pounds in there. He looked like a big dude. And you could tell that he could seriously crack. They were showing some of his highlights, and you could tell that the dude, like, if he puts a boxing combination together on you, you're going to sleep. Kind of a lot like Punahele Soriano. Like a very stocky, heavy-hitting frame. So at lightweight, it could be very dangerous. But he got out-grappled by Moises in that fight. He got the job done with leg kicks. I believe it was in the 3rd round he finished it, but he was getting him... He really hurt Ramirez in the 2nd round with leg kicks. And he also got him rocked with a left hook, I believe it was. But Moises, he couldn't really finish it on the feet. I believe he took him down with leg kicks. He knocked him down with leg kicks, and then he was following up with punches, and then they called it after that, if I'm remembering correctly. But great fight for Moises. He called out Dan Hooker after, which I think was a decent call out. But he just said, look, I'm a main event fighter. You know, I should be fighting in the main event of a fight night. Give me Dan Hooker. And I heard a little bit of him in his post-fight interview, but it sounds like he's asking for more, and that's what I like to see out of Moises. I'm glad that he just took care of business with this guy. Didn't get the finish as soon as you would have ideally liked for him to, but still got the finish. Let's see Mitch Ramirez get some more fights in his UFC career, and hopefully we'll see why it took Moises to the third round to finish him off, because Mitch Ramirez does look like he has a bit of promise, and that's saying a lot for being at the lightweight division. Jacqueline Amorim versus Corey McKenna. I picked Amorim on Tapology. I don't care about this fight, though. I literally went to go take a shower when it came on, so that was awesome. Danny Silva over Joshua Coulibaly. So apparently this was a pretty good fight. I was finishing up my shower, but apparently this was a very scrappy fight. I picked Danny Silva, and Danny Silva got the win. So yeah, if you're interested in watching any fights that you might have missed, apparently that was a pretty good scrap, the Coulibaly-Danny Silva scrap. So I don't know, check it out. Rafael Filho gets the submission over Ade Osborne. I'm not sure if I officially picked Filho by submission. I thought he would get the submission if he was going to win, but that's what I picked on Tapology, and Filho got the submission in round one. Ode Osborne, just at the end of the day, he's one of those fighters kind of like Anheleger. You know, he's got flashes maybe here or there of certain good things about his game, but everything isn't well-rounded enough and high-level enough to where he could really be at the highest level. And in flyweight, if you got a really good jiu-jitsu guy, he is going to do some damage. And that's what Rafael Filho did. He controlled the grappling, ended up getting the submission in the first round. So yeah, that was great. Josiane Nunes, Chelsea Chandler. Not going to go over this very much. Josiane Nunes did her thing of just like going out there trying to throw sloppy big punches. Chelsea Chandler is just bigger than her and took her down more times. We saw flashes of the Chelsea Chandler running away. There were flashes of it in that second round, I believe. Nunes was hit her with one shot. I think it was a big right hand up against the cage, and she sort of darts away against the cage. so we almost saw Chelsea Chandler recreate her most famous moment in the cage. But good for her. She gets a win. At least she could say that she got a UFC win after embarrassing herself in the UFC. Mike Davis. Ring rust is allergic to Mike Davis. It does not exist for this guy. He came out in the first round, knocked down Nathan Levy with a right hand, and immediately secures position, looks extremely calm throughout the process of controlling his back. Maybe not as aggressive as you would like to see, but extremely calm and patient. But eventually, Mike Davis in the second round, I can't remember how exactly they got to the ground, but he secured position, got his submission. So it was a very exciting fight. It was a fight that I was kind of expecting to go to decision and not be that exciting, but Mike Davis really showed what an impressive, well-rounded game he has. He didn't really have any call-outs for anybody, which is disappointing, because you would like to see a guy who's this talented to actually test himself against some people. But it is lightweight, so I can understand if he's just happy with being in the UFC. He can get a win here, every year and a half or so, and he could tell chicks that he's, in the UFC and he's on a 4-fight win streak. You know what I mean? You don't got to be fighting the Drew Dobers. You don't have to be fighting the Ignacio Bahamondes. You don't have to be fighting the Joel Alvarez. You don't have to be fighting the Thiago Moises. You don't have to be fighting the Benoit Saint-Denis, these types of guys. There's lightweight fighters in the UFC, and then there's the lightweight fighters in the UFC. But yeah, as far as the undercard went, so I went 5-2. I picked Nunes over Chandler. I was thinking she was going to win. But it's WMMA. Who cares? So subtracting the WMMA, I was 4-1 on the undercard, so I'm very happy with that. Otherwise, I was 5-2. On the main card, moving on up to GM3 versus Brian Barberena. I mean, he did exactly what I thought he was going to do. I thought he was going to get the submission in round 1. He ends up getting the submission in round 2. Gerald Meerschaert was simply just not afraid of Brian Barberena's power, because you can't really be afraid of Brian Barberena's power. He's not known to be a one-hit KO puncher. You know, he's an accumulative striker. He's a volume striker. He's going to accumulate damage on you over the fight to break you down. So as far as Brian Barberena at middleweight, yeah, it's just not a good idea. But Gerald Meerschaert was just, I mean, blasting doubles on him in the middle of the octagon. You know, he was setting them up pretty well, but I won't say that they were like perfectly timed takedowns or anything like that. He was seriously just like out wrestling, out grappling Barberena throughout the fight. Ends up getting Barberena's back and choking him out. So good fight from GM3. You gotta love the guy. He's tied up with Anderson Silva for the most finishes in the middleweight division. He has the most submissions in UFC history, or I mean UFC middleweight history. So yeah, I mean, you gotta give GM3 credit. I mean, I know I was really giving him shit in my predictions video, because it's like, I still find him hilarious. You know, for just the amount of damage that he takes as a BJJ guy in the middleweight division, but he still goes out there, gets after it, and ends up submitting these guys. And so he's the poster boy for jiu-jitsu bases in MMA, really, at middleweight. He's the poster boy for it. Just like what you look like when you're a really great jiu-jitsu fighter with very lackadaisical stand-up. And that's no offense to Meerschaert. You know, he knocked down Bruno Silva. So, you know, he's got some serious stand-up. I won't play like he's not, you know, an actual professional fighter. But in the middleweight division, we all know what would happen if you went up against the elite strikers. Macy Chiasson, Pannie Kianzad. Macy Chiasson did this really cringe, like pointing a fake gun, because obviously you can't bring a gun into the cage. She was like pretending like she was pointing a gun at Pannie Kianzad when they were starting to announce her name, and then she realized that they were having to say like her height and weight and where she's from and all that stuff, and then I think her arm got tired, or she just realized how stupid it would be to be standing there for the damn near 30 seconds it takes for them to say all that stuff. So she ended up putting it down and then taking 2 steps back and then bowing at her opponent, which was really weird, because it's like, how are you gonna like point a fake gun and then bow at the same time? Just weird, but just stupid stuff from Macy Chiasson. So yeah, she won that fight, but who cares? Christian Rodriguez versus Isaac Delgarian. Okay, so personally, so let's go over how this fight went. Isaac Delgarian controls the wrestling in the first 2 rounds. Now, I would say off my first impression of watching the fight that Isaac Delgarian won those first 2 rounds. Now, he gasses incredibly hard in the 3rd round, showing the most awful body language by going for the most pathetic single leg or double leg takedowns. I wouldn't even consider them takedowns, because he was just on his knees trying to grasp for Christian Rodriguez's ankles with his bare hands. He's not even, you know, around his hips or he's not even around his legs or anything like that. And then Christian Rodriguez just swips around the back, starts ground and pounding him, and essentially does that for the whole round. Absolute domination from Christian Rodriguez in that 3rd round. So I was thinking you could argue that that 3rd round was maybe a 10-8. So I was thinking the fight would possibly be a draw. But otherwise, if you score it as a 10-9 round for Christian Rodriguez, then I would say that Isaac Delgarian should win the fight 29-28 by winning the first 2 rounds, and Christian Rodriguez wins the 3rd round. Me personally, if I was judging that fight, the way my impressions off of watching it, I felt like giving Christian Rodriguez a 10-8 just because of how absolutely exhausted Isaac Dulgarian was, and he was just eating punishment the whole round. It felt like he was absolutely giving nothing back. So yeah, I mean, I disagree with the decision being a win for Christian Rodriguez. Yeah, I guess good for him. Moving on to Ovince St. Preux versus Kennedy Nzechukwu. Very, very entertaining fight, especially in the second and third round. Ovince St. Preux, he really proved me quite right in my prediction video, where it's just like he really doesn't have a very good fighting IQ for being this deep into his light heavyweight career. They mentioned it. He has 25 UFC fights, which is absolutely crazy to think of, that Ovince St. Preux has been fighting for that long and has fought that many times. But he is extremely active. So when you think about it, it's not surprising. But when you put it in perspective, 25 fights is a lot of fights. But Ovince St. Preux is super active. So yeah, good on Ovince St. Preux. But what I mean by his IQ is that he has, when he got into the clinch with Kennedy, he looked to be the stronger, more imposing guy in the clinch and in the grappling. So it really confused me why he didn't make any attempts to get it to the ground. I thought it would have been such an advantage for OSP if he was to get this fight to the ground and to remain on top. But I just saw no effort for OSP to do that whatsoever. And it's like, OSP, it's like, since when are you a striker? You're literally known for a submission that we are trying to name after you because you do it so well. And you're not even going to try to attempt to do it. So I thought it was very weird, the game plan from OSP in that fight. To be honest, I would have to rewatch the fight again to really score it accurately. But I felt like the consensus was it was 1-1, and then whoever won the third round won the fight. I felt like Kennedy Nzechukwu clearly won that third round. I felt like he was putting on the pressure more as the fight went on. He was landing more combinations. The fight, the entire time, and Dominic Cruz was mentioning it, they were going one shot for one shot every time because they were both too scared to follow up with another shot in fear of getting countered. And there were times that fight where, of course, they both countered each other, particularly OSP hit Nzechukwu with a very good shot that got him to the ground at one point. But on the feet, Kennedy showed a very, very good jab. And in the later of the second round and in the third round, he started to show a very unorthodox boxing guard, which I thought was very interesting to watch. And I would really recommend that Kennedy Nzechukwu takes time at a serious boxing gym, like a very, very serious boxing gym where they're going to teach him boxing fundamentals and get him confident on the feet. Because what was very evident about that fight was that they were both very tentative in the boxing exchanges, and you could tell that neither one of them had the strong enough confidence to just really let the combinations go and start ripping shots and, popping out a jab. And Nzechukwu has an extremely good jab. I mean, the guy is 6'5", has a crazy reach, so he has a very nice, long, snapping jab. And he has kind of like these thinner arms too. So he gets it out there very quick, and he's popping OSP with it all night. So I think if Nzechukwu got a very, very good boxing coach that could help teach him some boxing fundamentals, how to use his jab effectively, teach him some good combinations, and then more importantly, teach him how to defend and exit off of his punches, because that is what is very clearly holding Nzechukwu back. When he lets go in the pocket, he's very good at putting punches together, but he's not exactly so sure as to how to defend himself and exit the pocket afterwards, and that's usually where he ends up getting clipped. And this is something that's very typical for most MMA fighters, just mostly due to the fact that the boxing in MMA isn't as high level, because it's not broken down as much into a science as it is in pure boxing, where you are going to have to always think about the exiting and the defense as you are throwing your punches and your combinations. So I think Kennedy, with a very good boxing coach, could totally revolutionize his game and really become the contender in the light heavyweight division that we all see him having the potential in being. Because, I mean, the guy is 30 years old. You know, he still has time to improve and to go on a bit of a run here. But, I mean, Ovince St. Preux is 40 years old. You got to give the man credit. Yeah. They gave him the decision. I personally disagreed with it, but I'm not really going to make much of a fit about it because Nzechukwu was extremely tentative throughout the first 2 rounds and even throughout parts of the 3rd round. So you can't say that he was clearly winning the fight. So good for OSP. I can't be mad at it. Bryan Battle versus Angelusa. Okay, the aftermath of the fight was almost better than the fight itself. Bryan Battle is a fucking badass, man. Bryan Battle is the fucking man. Bryan Battle is the man. I just want to say, MMA is such a beautiful reflection of what true reality is. And Angelusa is the perfect example because when I was looking at Angelusa all week, not to be mean, but you could kind of see in his face that he's a bit of a dumb guy. And I was waiting to hear him speak when they do the little promo that says where they have to explain, you know, why they think they're going to win the fight tonight and whatnot, and, you know, what should the fans expect to see. And I'm not going to butcher this because it's impossible to, and I hope if you missed it, you can go back and find it somewhere. Angelusa, is explaining how he's going to beat Bryan Battle. He says, I am going to beat him because I am better than him. Okay, that is why. Like, this guy is got no reasoning in his head as to why he's actually going to win the fight other than, I am better. Okay. Like, bro, that's not logic. That's still hope and delusion. You're not... And it's so funny because it's like, the reason why it's such a great reflection of reality is because you look at Angelusa, and dude, you have the physique that every guy wishes they had, right? Just such an amazing athletic physique, but absolutely nothing going on upstairs. So Angelusa was getting his ass whooped in that fight. Essentially, he was just getting his ass whooped on the feet. Bryan Battle was taking it to the ground, controlling it in the clinch, really just doing whatever he wanted. And then at some point, as Bryan Battle is trying to initiate a Muay Thai clinch, he ends up poking Angelusa in the eye by accident. And Angelusa he has both of his eyes open. This is not a Jeremy Stevens, Yair Rodriguez situation where his eye is like twitching out and it's actually not opening. It's like remaining closed. Both of Angelusa's eyes were open. But for some reason, he tells the doctor, I can't see. And then the doctor, of course, has to tell the ref that he says he can't see. And every ref knows as soon as a fighter says that, it's your job to call the fight. So I'm not going to harp on too long about this because everybody knows what happened. And I want to talk more about Bryan Battle and how he handled it like an absolute G. Everybody knows as a fighter, the moment you say you can't see, that means you are quitting the fight. And all fighters know that you will do anything. You will lie to the doctor. You will say that you can see if you want to fight. So everybody knows it's kind of like a subliminal way of getting out of the fight. It's a way of saying you don't want to fight anymore without actually having to say you don't want to fight anymore. Because you know it's your way of getting out of the fight is by saying, I can't see. So Angelusa was losing. He said he couldn't see. And as they announced the decision as a no contest, the ref sort of left the both of them in the center of the cage. And so there was nothing in between them, and they turned to each other, and Brian Battle looks Angelusa dead in the face and says, "You're a fucking pussy. You're a pussy." And Angelusa, people start getting in the middle of it, and Angelusa and Brian Battle says, "I was beating your ass." And Angelusa flips out, classic lack of impulse control, and he... And all of a sudden, he's ready to kill Brian Battle. All of a sudden, he can see and he's ready to kill. And so everybody's just holding back Angelusa while he's having his little hissy fit. And Brian Battle gets interviewed and he points it out. It's like, how can you not see? But all of a sudden, you're ready to fight 30 seconds later. And it was hilarious because if Angelusa had actually taken all of the time that was given to him, the entire 5 minutes, hypothetically, he would have been ready to kill because it didn't even take that long, He only took like 90 seconds and he was ready to say he can't see. So yeah, Angelusa is a wuss. Shout out to Brian Battle. He said he would be down to do it next week whenever he's ready. So yeah, great interview post-fight from Brian Battle, and a great fight from Brian Battle. Marcin Tybura versus Tai Tuivasa, just such a fat potato matchup. I mean, such a fat potato fight. These two boys just started rock'em sock'em roboting each other from the second the bell rings, and Tai Tuivasa is messing up Tybura in the clinch with these elbows, and Tybura starts leaking with a seriously bad cut. Tuivasa is just messing up Tybura on the feet. Tybura ends up getting a takedown and ends up getting back control, puts in his rear naked choke, and ends up putting Tai Tuivasa to sleep. That was an absolutely fine stoppage. There was nothing wrong with that stoppage whatsoever. Herb Dean very clearly grabs Tai Tuivasa's arm, and Tai does not put a thumbs up. He doesn't do anything. Tai is out. But yeah, Rigo had a hilarious reaction yelling at Tai Tuivasa to not go out. I mean, I picked Tai Tuivasa too, but it's heavyweight. It's not like I was just like expecting Tai Tuivasa to win. To be honest, it's not like I was expecting him to be a lock of the card. So yeah, Tybura got it done at 38. Good for Tybura. Tuivasa, man, you're on a 4-fight losing streak, all finishes. You, sir. I'm not going to pick on Tai Tuivasa, man. But yeah, it was a good fight night overall, guys. For the main card, minus the WMMA fights, I went 1-3. 1-4 if you count the Brian Battle-Lusa fight, because I did not predict a draw or a no contest. I predicted Brian Battle to win a decision. But yeah, guys, I mean, that's the name of the game, right? You could do pretty good on one card and you'll do horribly on the next. But yeah, it was a pretty good fight night. Decent fights. Thanks everybody for watching. BetterMMA out.